And welcome, Patriot Radio News Hour. I'm Joe Jaquint, CEO of the Patriot Trading Group, and our toll-free number, 800-951-0592, the website at allamericangold.com, and welcome to Thursday, the dog days of summer, and what a day it has been. Gold is on a tear right now, up almost $20 here, 17.20 early this morning. Well, you guys were all sleeping. Gold went down to 1680. That's a long-term technical level. These chartist guys, they love that crap. But then the ECB raised rates, which was expected, but they were only expected to go 1/4 of a point. They went 1/2 a point, but let me tell you, there's so much more in it. Things are getting ugly. The hurricane that Jamie Dimon talked about last month is coming, whether you want to believe it or not, but gold has just completely turned around here. Like I said, up almost $20 here, 17.20. Silver higher as well. Wall Street it's off the lows, but Wall Street's down a couple hundred points. And Jason, a lot of new data coming out today. Jobless claims continuing to rise. Now, this is something, Jason, we've talked about this for a long time. This is the highest level again, going back to last year. 250 plus thousand people filing unemployment for the very first time. Continuing claims. These are people, okay, you've already filed. Unable to find work, also continuing to rise. This is like the third week in a row on continuing claims. It's not bad yet. Another 20,000 jobs a week. At that point, I'll start to get concerned. When we get into that 270 to 275 to 300,000 jobs lost, then it's time to get concerned. But Jason, it's definitely elevating.
Yeah, the jobless claims and all this other news that's going to go sour as the months go on. It's kind of like the roller coaster. We talk about the roller coaster. It's a good analogy, but I think the jobless claims you just mentioned is kind of like that part of the roller coaster where you're already kind of over the top of the edge. You're looking down, but it hasn't quite crashed straight down, Joe. I think that's where we're at when it comes to jobless claims and a whole lot of other stuff with the economy. It's we're already looking at where it's going. It's just we haven't caught the momentum straight down, Joe.
The bond market, we all need to pay attention. This is critical. Right now, the 10-year note, I'll call it the standard, is at 292, which is ridiculous because we know next week, whatever it is, the Fed's raising rates anywhere from best case scenario. I don't know what best case scenario is. 3/4 of a point to a full point. We don't know which. I think 3/4. Jason thinks it may be a full point. Doesn't matter, right? But you're talking about a Fed's funds rate that's going to be somewhere around 2.5%. How in the world could a 10-year note be at 2.9? Right? It should be 3.9. Back in the old days, it would be over 4%. You know, the old days, pre-financial crisis, 15 years ago. But inside of this, listen to this, the 2-year note, it is almost 25 basis points higher than the 10-year note. 10-year note at 2.9. The 2-year note at 3.15. This is massive inversion, but it gets worse. Even a 6-month note is yielding more than a 10-year note. A 1-year note yielding more than a 30-year note. Obviously, the 2-year note yielding way more than a 30-year note. This is classic inversion, and so here's what's happening. Is the lower end with the shorter maturities. They're reflecting, hey, the interest rates are rising. the higher end part, the longer term bonds, the 10-year, the 30-year, throw the 5-year in there. They're saying we think recession's coming. Right? So Jason, this bond market, we have this collision, just what we told you was going to happen. The Federal Reserve, they're so either they're so cruel. They're either so cruel or they're so incapable of putting their egos aside to see what's really happening. Jason, they are raising rates right into a recession.
Right. We talked about inverted yield curves for a while. It seems like a year almost. This is the real inverted yield curve. It's actually completely inverted, Joe. And just remind the audience, what does the yield curve when it inverts? What does it usually indicate? It always seems like a recession's coming right behind it, right?
Yep. 6 months. Within 6 months, you're in. And the reason why they say 6 months, you need 2 straight quarters of negative growth to be a technical recession. We may get that next week. When we get first look at second quarter GDP, it's going to be close. But neither here nor there. To Jason's point, we've had the bonds invert, but very briefly and barely inverting, right? Maybe the 2-year note was yielding a couple of basis points more than the 10. This is full inversion, and it's been this way now for almost 2 weeks, and it's getting worse. The inversion is getting worse. And that's a clear sign. When we get back, some very interesting language in the ECB press release that we need to take note of. In Japan, things continue to get worse there as well. Patriot Radio News Hour. Don't touch that dial. 800-951-0592. Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe and Jason here today, and talking about the ECB. They're a couple meetings behind us. So remember, what was it? I don't know, 90 days ago, whatever it was. It was end of March when the Fed finally stopped quantitative easing and raised rates 1/4 point. Remember way back then? Since then, they've raised 50 basis points and then 75 basis points. And now we're getting ready, we think, for another 75 to 100. But we remember that. So now the ECB, they actually haven't stopped their quantitative easing. Kind of an interesting thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. But their first rate hike today, everyone thought it was going to be 1/4 point, Jason. I guess they surprised and went 50 basis points. But let's face it, all these central banks, they're so far behind the curve because the realities are they really don't want to have to fight inflation. They're being forced to fight it.
Or maybe they want it this way, Joe. You know, once again, guys make decisions because they want things a certain way. To me, Joe, they want some inflation. I think that they have a problem with these massive debts, and these central banks are having trouble pushing on their Ponzi scheme, Joe. So maybe they're just a little behind the curve. They don't want the hyperinflation, but we'll raise the rates enough just to keep it from going Weimar Germany or
that's what you know. What I think, amen, right there. That is really, truly what's happening right now. Because let's face it, if they really care about the stealing of our wealth, because this is what inflation is, it's just theft. This is what the central banks are doing would make organized crime blush at how badly they're ripping us all off. They're stealing from us every single day. Most people don't realize it. They don't want to realize it, right? Because they want to believe that big corporations rule the world, because that's all Wall Street is. Big corporations ruling the world. We all know small business is what makes this country go. And really for small businesses, this is a death knell. And we'll get to that in just a minute. But to Jason's point, they just want to prevent horrible inflation. But that 2% target they created, that nonsense. And I remember when Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen came up with it. I was sitting on this airwaves pounding the desk, telling everybody, yeah, 2% is just an introductory number. And as soon as it's bad enough, somehow 4%, 5% is going to be completely acceptable. And I think, Jason, that's what they're hoping. If they can get their inflation number, back to 4 or 5%, they'll probably claim victory.
Yeah, I think 4 to 6% is going to be their new target goal somewhere in the future. And I think when things get really bad, this crash that they're going to be causing with the interest rates going up, after they get the so-called fix in, just like too big to fail, we had to swallow that one. The new swallow will be, well, the way we're going to fix it, that we're going to be stuck with 4 to 6% inflation, but that's better than the 10 to 20 or the 30 that we were looking at if we didn't fix it. I think that's the thing. And for those people out there that love the stock market that might be listening to this show, Wall Street's going to find out how much the Fed really cares about them, because I know they're going to crush Wall Street. And I'm sure the Fed will say stuff to Wall Street to make them feel like this is the best they can do. But, Joe, they don't have any allegiance to Wall Street. When it really comes down to it, they have allegiance to themselves, and they're the people that are bought into the Federal Reserve. They are going to crush
by
Wall
default,
Street.
Right? They have allegiance to the banks.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Which there go I would call this a very close relationship with Wall Street because of the banks, because of the investment houses. Listen, I'm going to give you my son's number again. You better get yourself protected. Obviously, you buy the gold and silver from Jason and I. The rest of it, you better make sure you've got it in the right place. 602-909-9048. You go to 1360 KHNC, and you can go to sponsors, get his number from there, because Jason's right. This is going to be a wild and crazy ride. So let me tell you what's new over in Europe. Get ready, because we know this comes everywhere. They've got another new tool. Isn't it great? Oh, yes, great. Another tool. I wonder what this tool will do. Holy cow, Jason. It does the same thing all the other tools do. Creates more debt. The ECB unveiled a transmission protection instrument. Yes, the TPI, Transmission Protection Instrument. And I was like, wow, transmission? I don't know what this is. Protection, okay, obviously we know they're trying to protect something. Instrument, right, it's this new tool. Well, they've got a big problem. And we've talked about Italy. We've been talking a lot about Japan. The crisis is coming somewhere. Italian bond yields have blown out again this morning. Mario Draghi, who used to be the head of the ECB, he has resigned as prime minister. There's big, big problems. So they're trying to raise rates. They're trying to stop quantitative easing. And then at the same time saying, hey, we've got this instrument that if we have to bail out Italy, we're going to. The problem is, after Italy needs to bail out, you got to bail out Spain, you got to bail out Portugal, you got to bail out Ireland. The bottom line is they may have to bail out Germany, Jason.
Right, and these guys that run these independent countries, part of the EU, they know they have economic problems also. If bailouts start to be talked about, they're going to line up. They're going to try to get to the front of the line, aren't they, Joe? I mean, they don't know how long the bailouts will even last, or if they're possible to a certain extent. So Italy just probably say, you know what, we want ours first. I don't want to be in the front of the line.
Yeah, right. Think about this nonsense. They're raising rates. And then they're talking about, oh, by the way, we're getting ready for bailouts. Already. Really? They hadn't raised rates in 11 years. And the first time they talk about raising rates, and they do it, they raised a whole 50 basis points. They got to throw in, oh, by the way, we're getting ready for the next round of bailouts. That tells you all you need to know. It can't be more obvious. You need to pull your head out of your backside. This is what is coming.
The
banks are insolvent. These countries are insolvent. Look at we ain't paying this debt off, never.
Joe, I don't think they're even going to tell us how the bailout's going to happen. I think it'll be completely behind closed doors, just like, and I'll just keep going back to the Glenn Beck piece. which he theorizes $1 trillion going out every week. Nobody knows about that. Nobody can prove whether it's happening or not, but it's definitely happening because of that. That information he pulled that day. It wasn't $5 trillion back in 08, 09, 010. It was $29 trillion, Joe. You just find out 10 years later. So if there's a bailout of Italy, why do I get the feeling they're going to really disguise that thing? Really keep it quiet, Joe.
Well, you know what's so funny? Let me give you a quote from Christine Lagarde. Remember, Lagarde was what, the head of the IMF? Was she head of the IMF, Jason? I think she was.
Yes, I believe so, yes.
Right? She was the head of the IMF. Now she's the head of the ECB. The head of the ECB, it was now the Prime Minister of Italy. He's gone. So here's what she says. The ECB alone will decide when to deploy this crisis tool, and that all Euro area members are eligible for TPI. So there you go, right to my point. They want, it's an Italy problem. They know. It's all going down, and by the way, we'll determine when we're going to use this crisis tool. And you know what's so funny? They didn't even say if. Right? They didn't say, well, we don't think we're going to have to use it, or no. They just said it like it's a full-blown conclusion, Jason. We do not get out of this year without the ECB using this tool. I guarantee it.
For all we know, Joe, the bailouts are happening as we speak. We have no idea. We can only go off the pittance of information that we do get, that you find on the news cycle, Joe, and what I'm looking up. All we could do is try to prognosticate what we think is happening, but we don't have a Freedom of Information Act telling us what's happening now, Joe. I'm guessing it's going to take 10 years, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. It's supposed to take 2. They'll tie it up in courts. By the way, the Japanese economy continuing to crumble. They're talking about industrial production down double digits month over month. Industrial production in Japan sitting at -3% and 4% year over year. And again, Jason, this storm, it continues to brew. It continues to grow. Of course, Wall Street's trying to pretend that it's not going to happen. But the realities are, Jason, it's already too late.
And this is just a thought. If the IMF comes in at some point and is talking about helping Japan, then you'll know it's really bad, because the IMF is usually there to support all these third world nations and developing nations. But why do I get the feeling, Joe, there's no one there to support Japan or bail them out specifically? They've already printed crazy and they bought up their stock market. Japan is where everybody else is headed. So what happens to Japan is the future for all these other countries, Joe.
Yeah, and Japan, Italy, all the rest of them. And the problem is, and here's why is it so? Why does it matter if Japan, goes belly up, or Italy or Spain or Portugal, or pick a country? Because it's all tied together. This systemic risk. They didn't get rid of it. They actually made it worse. But they did do one little thing. They made one little change to the systemic risk. They just changed who ends up holding the bag. That's the change they made.
Hot potato.
Right? You want to know what Dodd-Frank did? Let me tell you what Dodd-Frank did. It didn't fix any of the systemic risk. None of it. I mean, they created a bunch of regulatory agencies. Remember, what was it, yesterday or the day before? I was telling you about how they missed the temper tantrum. Where were they? They didn't see it coming. Next thing you know, the Fed spends $19 trillion to cover it up.
It's a hot potato, Joe. Who's going to be left holding the hot potato, right?
Well, guess what?
Lehman Brothers.
Who's going to be left? You, me.
Yeah.
Depositors. That's the change they made. They made one real change. And that real change was who gets left without a chair when the music stops? Right? And the answer is real simple. The depositor. That's the only reason. When I say don't have excess money in the bank, this is what I mean. Because when the music stops, the depositor is going to pay. And I don't want you to pay. That's all. That's why I said, it's funny, believe it or not, having it in obviously in gold and silver is fantastic because you're immune to it all. But even if you have it in Wall Street, you're better off than having it in the bank. I mean, you may get crushed, but at least they're not going to be stealing all of your wealth from you. Because this is what is going to happen. And now, some interesting developments today. Ford laying off 8,000 people. 8,000 at Ford. Of course, we know. We get it. Of course, they're saying, well, we're getting ready for electric vehicles. So I don't know. I guess all the gas combustion people are out at Ford. But another big development, the latest in what consumers aren't paying besides automobiles. 800-951-0592, Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe and Jason here. Like I said, we've got a gold rally here today after hitting what we call long-term technical support early this morning. That the paper guys love that crap. It bounced off really hard into positive territory. Listen, I'm going to keep $20 gold. It was $21.20 yesterday. I'm going to keep that for today at $21.20. Obviously, we know tomorrow it's going to cost more if it stays there. What else? 1/10 ounce American Gold Eagles. I got a couple hundred more of those. Those are starting to pop up here and there. By the way, once again, on this item, I will tell you, we are so much cheaper than everybody. It's hard to understand how we can be this much less than everybody else. Most everybody else is like $275, $276, $278. We got 10th ounce American Gold Eagles at $240 at 800-951-0592. And then, of course, on the silver side, we've got Silver Eagles. They're $675 per roll right now. Half dollars $2.35, quarters $2.15, and dimes $107.50. But Jason, it's definitely been a crazy morning. I think the ECB caught a lot of people off guard, going 50 basis points, but kind of really talking out both sides of their you-know-what, because then they said, oh, by the way, we've got our new crisis tool ready to go.
The tools, Joe. They're really all you...
And of course, what is the tool? How can you call it? Well, we just got a different tool to create debt. I mean, isn't that the same tool?
They use the word. They use the word tool because it makes it sound like they have something they can fix it with. That's why they use the word tool.
Yes, they're not Bob the Builder. I'll tell you that right now. Shares of AT&T getting taken to the woodshed this morning. Their CEO was out saying that customers have started putting off paying their phone bill. Wow. Now that's a new one. Remember during the financial crisis, it was, hey, we're gonna pay everything but the mortgage. Now, Jason, most people don't have them where they got to pay rent, right? So they don't have the option of not paying the rent, because if they don't pay the rent, they're going to be homeless. So now we're seeing, we already saw, in matter of fact, if you watch any of your local news, I mean, yesterday I was watching our local news, and they had a big deal about the repo man, right? The repo man is back. And they were talking about how the repo guys here in Arizona, because people are moving here left and right, and they're all getting their cars repoed. Well, now AT&T says, hey, guess what? We got another problem. They're not paying their phone bill.
Uh-oh. That's what it is, Joe. Uh-oh. And you talk about the repo, man. That just it brings back all kinds of memories. I was a process server, which is not really I'm not actually repossessing stuff, but I'm handing out the bad news. And I could just imagine if I was back in that job, Joe, how busy it must be getting with all these notices for, hey, I'm taking you to court. And we're going to get into your bank account and take your money because you're not paying. It's what happens, Joe.
I mean, I would venture to say this one again. Cell phones. That's kind of like the last thing you don't pay.
I know.
Right?
I know.
This is new. This one caught me off guard. I didn't. You know what? The cars. I wasn't surprised. That didn't surprise me. Credit cards. That wouldn't surprise me either. Right? That makes sense. I'm not paying my student loans. That makes sense.
I have a theory, though. You cancel.
I want to hear it.
You don't pay your phone bill. And of course, these guys are tenacious. You don't pay your phone bill, they shut your phone off. But that doesn't prevent you from going in and getting the promotional startup at the other cell phone company, which might be cheaper. You just kind of roll. You kind of roll with a new service, Joe, whatever you can possibly afford, right?
That's what it's going to be. I think at the end of the day, that is exactly what is going to play out as we watch all of this. And again, we had some other economic data. We talked about jobless claims, above 250,000 filing for unemployment for the very first time. It's getting worrisome, right? We like that number to be 230,000 or less. But it's worrisome. If it gets, Jason, if we cross over that 270 number and head towards 300,000, that's going to be a problem. Because then we're going to be, hey, guess what? I'm not paying any bill.
Yeah, Joe, well, that's coming for a lot of families, Joe. No matter what, this crash that's coming, whether it be a slow grinding crash or a really fast, sudden crash, it's grinding people into the ground, Joe. I mean, how much government give out money are we looking at in the next couple of years for people that just can't pay anything, and then the burden of the working class and the business class to support more people on the till, right, Joe? It's happening. This is the lower standard of living, and this is the way you end up with serfs and lords, Joe.
Well, let me just say this. I want everybody to pay attention because it's playing out all over the world. You're not seeing it. Listen, there are so many protests going on over in Europe. You don't even know. No one's talking about the truckers have blocked off the port of Oakland. Because once again, California, with these ridiculous rules, making it impossible for independent truckers to survive, right? In China, it's gotten so bad now that China has brought out the tanks to protect the banks and prevent locals from actually getting to the banks now. As again, Jason and I have been talking about the crisis in China where people have just decided, these are mortgages on buildings that haven't been finished yet, that they're not, hey, we're not paying for it.
They just
right?
They've
stopped paying.
They just stopped paying. They're like, you know what? Here's the funny thing about China. It's a dream for central bankers to have all governments to be like China because, man, the control you have is great. But, Joe, here's the problem. When the citizens can't get enough money for food and housing, that group think that they have in China, they all shut down at once. They start talking to each other. It's like, well, let's just all stop paying at once. Because that's how social society works, Joe. That's how socialism works, right?
When we get back, I'm going to tell you what banks are telling customers in China. And again, it's a warning of what they're going to tell us when it happens here. Patriot Radio News Hour. We'll be right back. 800-951-0592. $20 gold, 21.20. 10th ounce gold Eagles at $2.40. Gold's up 15. 17.50. $18.15 right now. Silver, it's up a few cents here. 1870. The Dow is lower today, but big news out of China. Things have gotten worse, substantially worse. The Henan province, Henan. I think I'm pronouncing that right. To give you an idea, this province, 94 million people. So,
holy cow.
A little under a third of the entire United States population. The Bank of China in this province has announced that the savings of the depositors in their branches are investment products and cannot be withdrawn. And this is what we saw in Greece. This is what we saw in Cyprus. This is what we're going to see in Japan. This is what we're going to see in Europe. And this is what we're going to see here. These are the new rules. Now, this piece of legislation, it wasn't in Dodd-Frank. No, this is part of the SEC and banking law at any point in time now. When they determine, think about what the ECB said. Hey, by the way, we're going to decide when to use this crisis tool. This is what's going to happen. Our Federal Reserve, they're going to decide. You're not allowed to withdraw your money. Now, they'll let you get $20 out of the ATM. You'll still be able to go and buy your groceries. Yep, you can do that, sure. Want to pay your mortgage? Great. Make your car payment? Fine. Oh, you want to take your money out of the bank?
It has to stay in the system, Joe. It has to stay in the system. I mean, what's funny is us that use cash still, it's Federal Reserve notes. It's their money. Their name is on the money. But it shows you how weak their Ponzi scheme is when their money with their name on it that they control us with is actually a threat to their system. I mean, let's face it, in 1933, gold was a threat to them controlling everything, so they got rid of it. In 1965, silver was, inflation was happening, and that's you got to get that out of the system. Can't have silver in there. When people figure out how much that silver's worth, man, they'll start looking and asking questions. I mean, even in the copper pennies, they took the copper out of the pennies in 1982 because there's too much copper in the pennies. And now paper, Joe, paper, their system, they can't have you withdrawing that because that breaks down the system. So just like Joe said, as long as you leave it in the system, if I write a check to Joe, it leaves my digital account, stays in Joe's digital account. That's fine. But if you pull a cash out, well, then that messes everything up, Joe. You can't have that.
Oh, no. Nope, that's going to be a problem. And again, this is what's going to happen here. And we already know they're going to go with this digital currency. Banks, as we know, listen, they've been destroying banks forever. They want to get, think about, now we understand what was the race to get so big. And the race to get so big was, hey, we're racing to survive. Think about it. After too big to fail, you would have thought, well, gosh, we probably doubled the amount of banks we've had in the country since then, right? Because we want to keep them smaller so don't pose systemic risk and all that stuff. We've lost half of our banks since then. I mean, we're down to 4,000. And Jason, the number shrinks every single day, seemingly. But the reason why they're in this race to get big, because if you're not big enough when this thing comes down, you won't exist anymore. Most banks will be out of business.
And it's interesting, Joe. 98% of the money already is digital. They already have a digital money system. It's crazy how that little 2% of coins and paper money, how that's such a threat to their system. Just that little 2%.
You know why? Let me tell you right now, they can't handle it. Listen, I know the housing crash was terrible. It really was. But do you know how many people really didn't pay their mortgage? Because, you would think, 40, 50% of the people didn't pay their mortgage? No. I think the official number at the end of the day, I don't even think it hit 3%. Right? 90-some-odd% of people paid their mortgage during the financial crisis. But just that small percentage was enough to tilt this thing, and this is the problem. If everybody starts pulling their money out of these banks, it's over. And it does, and I say everybody, just a couple, to Jason's point. Hey, if 3% of all depositors tomorrow went to their banks and pulled all their money out, the whole thing would collapse, Jason.
It would be apocalypse.
Yeah,
it would be horrible. It would be a horrible thing. Horrible thing. And think of what Joe just said. Most people were paying their mortgages. You know, I lived in one of those neighborhoods where a lot of the trailer park were buying homes and getting loans they weren't supposed to get. I was in a starter home neighborhood when I bought my home in 2004, going into 2005. And in 2010, I walked out my front door, and the house on the left and the house on the right and the three across the street, they were all empty. They were all empty, Joe. You know, because we were kind of tailing towards the end of all those risky loans, and I just happened to be a pizza delivery driver that knew how to handle my money. And four of those homes, they stopped making payments. The fifth home, the guy was trying to transition out and get a renter in there. That's what happened back there.
Yep. Yesterday, Goldman Sachs put out a letter to its big investors, warning them, hey, don't get caught up in this rally. A lot of pain is going to come, and they obviously listen to me. They have to, because they used exactly what I always tell you. It's going to be a sudden stop at a magnitude most people are going to not be prepared for. October's just around the corner. Get your financial house in order now. Get that gold put away now. 800-951-0592. Final segment coming up. 800-951-0592. Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe and Jason on this Thursday, and talking about what's going on now in China. The ECB, not only did they create a new tool, they made something a really big distinction. This isn't just an Italian problem. All ECB members will be eligible for this, and again, this just tells you how close we are to disaster when entire nations need to be bailed out. And again, when we sit here and we look at what's happening in China now, saying, hey, listen, by the way, let's not kid ourselves. Those deposits, those are for investments for these banks and not for you. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what these banks really are, right? You loan when we deposit that money, we loan it to them. That's the rules. That's how it works. We loan them the money. And then if that somebody else can't pay, then we've got a problem. And right now, Jason, we could have, obviously we look at what's happened in the crypto space, a lot of defaults and bankruptcies there. You look at what's going on in now whether it be China's property markets or what's happening in Japan, here at home, right? People aren't paying their auto loans now; they're not paying their cell phones. I'm sure when we get the credit card data out, they're not paying their credit cards, right? And all of a sudden, these defaults start to stack up. And then the pressure starts to build on these banks.
And Joe, a lot of college loan people haven't had to pay on their college loans yet, and that might be coming to an end. They might have to start paying their college loans on top of this.
Right? I mean, how many years are they going to go, right? But you throw that in the mix, you make 40 million people start paying their student loans again. I mean, it's chaos, absolute chaos. 800-951-0592 before the tanks are out in front of your bank. Get your gold put away, and then you're not going to have to worry about it. $20 gold pieces, $2,120. 10th ounce American Gold Eagles at $240 at 800-951-0592. 0592. Jason and I, we are coming right back with the half-empty cup. It's Thursday, so one of your favorites, Sonia Miller, is going to be joining us, Jason, and it's always highly entertaining. By the way, President Biden's got COVID again. Quadruple vax and boosted, still gets it.
You know, I wanted to say one thing, Joe. You know what's worse than a tank in front of your bank? Is when the bank is no longer there at all. I think that's what we're going to be. That's the future. No bank at all there. Phone call and an internet and a text, right?
Well, think about it now. When's the last time you called your bank?
I've actually tried calling and it sucks.
Call the 800 number on the back of your card, right? You're on hold for 40, 50 minutes. Could you imagine during a crisis, right? Your approximate wait time will be 4 days, 16 hours, and 23 minutes.
They don't even have voice messages at after-hour phone calls anymore at any of these businesses, Joe. Don't leave a message. We're not taking it.